Welcome to the second episode of Let's Chat Movies. This is an episode that I did with a new guest named Noah. Enjoy the episode, and here we go. Also, before we start, I know in the episode I said this was a Hammer film. I got confused. I watched two vampire movies back to back, so you'll hear that mistake. I'm sorry about that. All doing. Welcome to Let's Chat Movies, the second episode of the show. And today I am joined by a special guest. This guy does voiceover work. This guy has been in journalism. This guy runs like one of the best probably produced podcasts that I've ever listened to. Today we got Noah. He is on the show today. He's going to be talking about the movie that I watched recently, which was uh, Devils of Darkness. That's the movie. And Noah, have you seen this movie before? Have you ever watched it?
Not until you sent me the link and said, "Hey, we're gonna watch this movie." And
Yeah.
I
Yep.
watched it. Man, I was so happy it was on YouTube. That was great.
I try to make sure. I try to make sure that that all my guests will get access to the movie. Like,
Oh yeah, I would not have paid for this movie.
no, no. I would not pay for any of these movies I'm going to be reviewing from now on. But this movie's it's 1966. This is a Hammer film. And do you know anything about the Hammer films?
Um, I did not know that this was a Hammer film. I thought this was Planet Films.
Well, it has this was like this was like a movie that was not the traditional. This wasn't the traditional feeling or nothing like that. And this it's pretty boring. Like it's pretty boring. I'm not even gonna lie to you. But we got. Let's just talk about this movie. Let's talk about this movie. So one of I would say this. The movie has a pretty good opening. I like the flash. I like the flashback scene. I like how you're seeing, when the cult was doing its sacrificing and stuff like that, and then when it fades to black and the opening credits come, I think that's a really good scene. You know,
Yeah, this film is strong. Probably until about the 20-30 minute marks. The whole opening of it is pretty good, especially in terms of storytelling and intrigue. The whole dance that happens where Tanya is to be married to someone, and she does this really fun dance and then just drops
yes,
dead
yeah,
of a
really
heart
fun
attack.
dance.
It's so
Yes.
good. You're like, oh, I was not expecting her to just
Now, now you know
drop
what I will
dead.
say. I will say about this is I do not like. Do you see how they try to zoom out on this giant bat on the
Oh,
tree? Do you
yes.
do you see how bad that looks? I'm like, how does nobody see this? How are we all chilling when this giant human-like bat is just hanging from a tree? Like, what is happening?
Yes, some of the effects in the film weren't done well, and then there were some that were actually done well. Like, for instance, there was an effect at the end. At the end, they discover this whole cult, and the cult is basically the police discover this cult, and then the cult has to escape, and they're
Oh
running away.
yes.
And rocks and caves are,
Yeah,
or the
rocks.
cave in
This
is
it,
starting
it
to
yeah,
happen.
the whole ending, dude, the setup to the ending was so good. I
And
like it falls so short. It-
the practical effect that happens is Tanya, who becomes a vampire, she drops dead and becomes the vampire bride of the main antagonist.
yeah.
She's running, and we have a forced perspective that, in my opinion, wasn't done very well. we have a forced perspective where rocks are falling, and then we see this big rock, which is clearly closer to the camera, fall down on top of where Tanya
Yes.
is running. And it really does look like a big rock fell in front of the camera. And I was sitting there going, hold on, does this mean she just got crushed, or was this just a cool way to show that rocks are falling? And then the next like two shots later, we see that she's been crushed, and I go, oh,
Yep.
okay, so we killed the vampire by
You,
falling rocks.
yeah, you know what I was so mad about? Because I thought when the cult gives you these like vampire powers, why does rocks, out of all things, kill the vampires?
Yeah, why?
Like, why does falling rocks kill the bride? Because before she becomes a bride, there's another in the beginning. The first bride in the beginning you saw, she looked like she could take on the vampire.
hmm
She looked like she has like some powers. So I figured that like I was like, okay, this is gonna be like some like vampire versus cult leader, like because like in part of the movie you see this bribe get slapped in the face, basically being being told that yeah, you've been used for many years because he just moved on from you.
hmm
And you see some you that's why I love the build up of this movie because you see that relationship just fall, and you see her, it looks like maybe that she's going to help like the police officers and all that stuff, but it falls short because of course it does.
Yeah. I mean, the only practical effect or special effect that I actually enjoyed was towards the beginning. You have one of the friends of Paul Baxter, who's the main character. After her brother dies, she is walking with the antagonist, Count Sinestri, along a bridge, and then she
Yes.
looks down and sees her own reflection and
Yeah,
doesn't
yeah,
see his.
yeah, just sees her own reflection and it's like, oh shit.
Yeah, and that's done well. I mean, that's a trope that you see in a lot of vampire films anyways, but it was done pretty well compared to small rock falls in front of camera. Oh wait, it
Yeah,
crushed the person over there. Or
yeah, it doesn't
the
feel
beginning with the
forced.
bats. Like,
It doesn't feel forced at all. Like if
no.
that scene where they're walking, they're just having a walk, like it feels so natural. Because also I think the actor that played the cult leader, like the main cult vampire, he did really well. Like
He worked real well.
the performance was pretty good. I ain't gonna lie. Like
Yeah, I like him, but I think that counts have been done better in the past. This
yes,
movie
yes.
borrows heavily from just Dracula, the actual story of
Yeah,
Dracula,
the
the
actual
whole
story.
going to a different country, discovering a vampire, having friends die, returning home, vampire follows you home,
Never
and
follows
then
you home.
having the whole confrontation with the vampire there. I mean, down to the whole,
I mean, let's be
like
honest.
Brides
Let's
of
be honest.
Dracula.
It's Dracula. It's Dracula. Like
It
like
is.
it's 30s Dracula. Like the story, it's like that story being just thrown again into a different time.
Yeah, it's French Dracula, and while I liked Noel playing Sinestri, Sinestri's motivations were really a lot
I
of the characters in general were kind of lackluster for me
Yeah.
in terms of
Yeah.
motivations. Like Paul's basically, "Oh, no, my friends died. I'm gonna go back to London and figure out why
Yeah,
they
figure
died.
out.
'Cause people told
It,
me this wasn't it, and witchcraft
it,
is stupid, so it's gotta
and
be something."
didn't you see how every time a character would die, it just felt so like nothing. No
Yes.
weight. There's no weight. There's no like feel bad for this character that you saw in the beginning got killed. Like nobody cares. It feels like
And the only person that I was mildly interested in was Karen Steele, Tracy Reed playing Karen Steele, who's the redhead and
yeah,
becomes
the
the future
redhead.
bride. And I think what's interesting about her character is the way she interacts with Paul is so much different than any of the other male and female characters interact with Paul.
Yes,
And so
yes.
I was like, I'm interested by you. Are you a vampire? Are you just What are you?"
And she
And she's
had
like,
this
"Oh
like,
yeah, I'm a model and whatnot."
yeah, yeah. She had at first when I saw the party scene, and I saw that, it's like the character looked pretty interesting. The character felt like, okay, there's some depth here. There might be some depth here. You know,
Yeah.
it
She
it kind of ruins it because then you're like, oh, she's just a model, and that's how she gets sucked into this. She's
Yep.
doing a job, like,
Yeah, she does a very good job, or rather, the writing around her character is nice and mysterious, just enough to grab you as an audience member to want to watch more of her character. And then we get to the second painting scene with Sinestri, and you realize that the only character that was interesting was her for the party scene, and her for the rest of the film is just basically going from place to place with very blank expressions, being told what to do by everyone else. Eh,
yes.
like her
It,
character just
it,
starts strong and goes flat.
it feels like that with a lot of characters. It feels like, I feel like necessary, like at first I thought he was to be, a bigger like villain, like he was
Mhm.
going to be this cult leader, but it kind of just, especially the ending, how he dies and all that stuff. But like, I
His
like
death.
it
Oh.
was bad. But like I thought all this setup from the beginning and from going on. I thought that I thought he was gonna have a bigger role in this. Like, yeah, it's kind of weird how he just shows up to random places, or there's some like kind of voodoo, like kind of like magic happening with the painting and stuff like that.
Mhm.
But that's all. That's all there is to it. Nothing doesn't come together.
Yeah, I think that Hubert Noel did as good as he could with the script. He really
Yeah,
embodied the character, but there wasn't much to embody. So honestly, I don't imagine it was that hard to embody a blank slate. But you're 100% right. Sinestri is so boring throughout the entire film, and the whole reason he wants brides is basically because he's getting bored with his previous one.
yeah, like he's
Like,
horny. He's
yeah,
horny, and
exactly. And there's
and
nothing else to him.
there's nothing else to it. And every time I watch these movies, sometimes it's plain simple. The villain was horny, and he needed another bribe, I guess.
Yeah, he I mean, we get a part where you have to read inside the book that basically says that he terrorized a town and then they buried him alive, and that was the whole beginning of them digging him back up. But we don't really get why did he terrorize the town? Like,
Why?
was
Yeah,
he
why?
what is his
Why
point?
does he
What
stay in
happened?
this town? Like, why?
Yeah,
Why
what
does he stay
happened
in
in his life?
this folklore town? Like, well,
What happened in his life to make him so horny? What happened in his
true,
life to
true.
make him a vampire in the first place? Like, all we know is him getting dug up and then going, "I'm gonna take this woman as my bride," and he does so. But why? What
I
is his character motivation? And then you get, on the other end, Paul as the
oh
primary
my
protagonist,
oh
who is just 1950s and 60s
I
lead male.
dude,
That's it.
you know what? And I just got off of watching a 70s movie. No, I just got off of watching a 50s movie that were all the cops, the investigators, the main character are all dumb. And I'm like, okay, please don't do the same thing all these movies do. And of course, it's Paul asking questions, getting answers, asking questions, being really boring, just going place from place. And it just, there's no real setup to it. There is one part I like is where he goes into the scientist guy that's doing all the animal
Yeah, the
experiments and stuff like
laboratory
that,
stuff.
and the
Yeah.
laboratory gets all messed up. You really see like, oh, okay, these cult guys, they got some for real power. But
Yeah, I got messed up a little bit because I couldn't tell if Paul died, which I'm pretty sure he did because we saw him in a casket and they were like, "Oh yeah, we killed the guy who took the bat symbol." But I got really confused because his death didn't matter. And
Yeah,
then we
no.
got the British police coming in and solving the end of the movie and solving the conflict. And these are characters that were established three-fourths of the way through the film. So it's
Mhm.
like, why did we follow this protagonist for a death that I didn't even really realize he was dead for, just to have characters we know nothing about solve everything for
Yeah, they
characters who
just
are
solve.
nobodies?
They're nobodies, and somehow these nobodies that we just started seeing show up in the movie. Oh, now they can solve the whole case. Like I, I and it gets even worse when all this setup, all this buildup with all these characters, showing all these new characters. When I was watching this movie, I was like, how is this going to end? Because this could either end really badly, because is all this setup could mean nothing, or there could actually be a good '60s film ending. Do you want to guess what ending that was?
Hmm. I think I know.
Oh yeah, you
Yeah,
know, the cave, the whole cave, the whole ending scene. I was watching. I loved how everything looked, what the cult members were doing. You want to tell? Do you want to tell the people how it ends?
yeah. So basically, Sinestre grabs Karen and brings her downstairs into the cave down below. And he throws her on an altar and he's like, "I'm going to make you my new bride. This is going to be awesome." And
Yep.
all of the cult members gather around and they're like, "This is awesome. This is amazing."
Yeah. Oh yeah. This
Everyone's
is.
having a
We've been
great
waiting for
time.
this. We've been waiting for this moment.
And the colors, the saturation of the reds, like it really pops
It
off
it
against the
really
dark
looks good.
earthy
I'm
tones.
so I'm so disappointed. How Why did they put so much effort into how this whole ending looks?
Yeah,
And
it looks great. It's just story-wise not good. And basically what happens is the police who had been following Paul, who is now dead slash disappeared at this point, go, "Well, I guess we'll go ahead and act on this lead. We didn't believe 5 minutes ago that vampires existed, but we've decided with Paul's death
we've
that we
decided.
do."
Yeah, we've
I,
decided.
I've changed my entire worldview because of one death.
We believe in the vampires now. We're gonna go stop this.
So they drive on off to the cave. They head down into the cave and they're looking, and Sinestre is so excited to make Karen his bride, but then Tanya flips her over and goes, "No, you can't make her your bride. Look at this."
Yeah,
And there
yeah.
is a Catholic cross that has been burned into Karen's shoulder. And Sinestre is like, "Ah, hiss, boo,
Oh,
Catholics,
yeah.
gross."
It gets even
Uh,
worse. It gets
and
even
then
worse.
he just lightning strikes, the cave begins to
Oh,
tremble. The police are like, "Hey, you, stop that." And as rocks begin to fall, crushing members of the cult, the police follow Sinestre, who picks up Karen and sprints out of some form of exit, or rather down a cave hallway, who then his old wife, Tanya, who is also a vampire, follows him. She gets crushed by a rock along the way,
yeah. She
and then
dies too. Like,
yeah, she just dies.
just
That's it.
dies. Just dies.
And
Like,
that's it.
no, no, like, no. Dude, you know what I was thinking of? I really thought we're gonna have a vampire versus vampire
Oh,
moment. I wish we
it,
would have got that.
I mean, this might be too feminist to say, but if Tanya was able to kill Sinestri and
Uh,
take his spot, and then basically be like, I don't need this man to
exactly.
lead me. I
Yeah,
need me.
exactly. Like breaking out of the shackles. Like that could
So
have been that. Just
So then Sinestri runs through the hallway, climbs up a ladder or something, and then sprints into a graveyard holding Karen. And at that point, the sun has started to
uh,
rise, and it
and
shoots.
then this
shoots
fuck
out like these beams from behind a gravestone,
you
and Sinestre just goes like, "Ah, this hurts! Ah!" and he
you
just burns
see,
to die.
and then it shows this glimpse of this, like it shows this terrible looking cross. I, I'm like, there's no way this is how that ends, and then it just ends. The credits roll, and it's over. Like I,
Yeah, this was a movie that I watched interested for the first like 20 or so minutes. And then I started playing games and threw it on my second monitor and watched it a lot more passively because it just lost it
yeah,
lost its power.
it,
I
it
Go ahead.
it really had such it really was building up to something. It,
It was. Yeah, I was about to go back to the beginning. That's how it ends, and the ending is not good. It looks great, but it's not good. But then you get to the beginning where Paul, who's a writer, is vacationing in France with a bunch of his friends in this small town, and basically his friend goes spelunking and ends up in a cave and is killed while the other one is captured. And the police, the very stereotypical French inspector, just didn't really care, wasn't really looking into it.
you know what? I forgot to mention this in the beginning. You know what my favorite character was in the whole movie?
What?
Inspector Mullen, the French guy,
Oh,
because he's literally the embodiment of what Americans think French people talk like.
yes,
He he says every stereotype, every scene. It's so good. I laughed so hard watching Mullen.
yeah, this film not only borrows heavily from the story of Dracula and kind of retells it, but it also borrows so many tropes,
It does.
and
It does.
God, it just borrows so much of it.
It,
So,
bor-
like,
it borrows a lot. It
an American playing a French inspector that is just the embodiment of a French person
yeah.
speaking.
Yep.
And then you get like the gypsy who runs out of nowhere and it's like,
Yep.
here's a prophecy. Okay, goodbye.
Yep. Yep. Oh, don't go there. Don't go down there. There's something evil. It's definitely you could count the start. You can count what they're borrowing from, like,
Yes.
and it honestly just it really does feel like they took a story that's well known, they took some tropes that's well known, and just put them in a movie and tried. I feel like they tried. I feel like they really tried the first 20 minutes and then gave up.
Yeah. Yeah, the first 20 minutes is worth watching because there's so much mystery in the air, and so it gives you a lot of time to think and try and figure out characters' motivations. And then once you get past that 20 minutes, you realize that you wasted your time thinking and
You did. You did.
it's not worth it. But if you just stop at the end of 20 minutes and then you rewrite the film in your mind, it would be so much more
It'd be so
fun.
much better. It'd be so much better. Yeah.
So, how would you change the film after that 20-minute mark to make it more engaging, to give the characters more depth?
Okay. Okay. You I've been thinking of this because I think you know what I think the first 20 minutes we should I feel like, this might sound, there might be some Paul fans out there,
Hmm.
but I feel like they should have just killed Paul early. Paul should have been the one that died early. And when it got and I feel like they should have done more. They should have done I feel like the movie would have been so much better if they focused on, for one, they gave the cult a for real backstory. What's the cult's
Mhm.
motivation on this whole thing? And I feel like it'd be so much better if we just got to see the rest of the movie, this trio of Karen, and the main co-leader and his other bride, this trio relationship. And I really wanted to see Karen, or even just like, like Tanya, just one of those people just break out of it and really become either the main villain or stops the main cult leader,
Yeah, I think if they were to take Paul's character and take him, start the film with where Paul is at in the party, where he's already skeptical about vampires, and we flip to Karen as the main
Yes.
character, and
Yes.
Paul plants these seeds of doubt in her mind that there might be, vampires, and that this Armand whatever his name was, is Sinestri. And so we flip focus from Paul as the main character. Instead, we use him as a lens, a catalyst. We flip over to
Yes.
Karen as she's being seduced by this man and doesn't realize he has a wife, doesn't realize he's a vampire or a cult or anything like that. And we focus instead on the dynamic between those three as Karen tries to figure out, is she being led astray? Is she going to become a victim? Or is this just a really charming, handsome man? And then
Yes.
you get to the end where Sinestri reveals himself. Karen makes the decision, I don't want to be the bride of a vampire. And then Tanya steps in anyways and is like, you can't take her. This is not okay.
Yes. Even
I love
even
that.
if even a Tanya and Karen team up would be insane. Like if they teamed up at the end. Like I just feel like if they would have if we would have let if Paul would have became a side character, just
Mhm.
just in the background, giving maybe honestly, maybe Paul is our guy giving us the information about the cult, because 'cause isn't he investigating this whole movie about the cult, or trying
Yeah.
to? Like
So
I
if
feel
we
like
go to Dracula, the main character in Dracula is not Dracula, it is Arthur what's his face.
uh
Uh
it was the
Give me a second. It's
I reviewed Dracula.
John Stewart.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
yeah,
Yes.
John Stewart and Jonathan Harker is who introduces the story and plants those first doubts uh of who Dracula is, because Harker's, goes to Dracula's castle, and then he's not allowed to leave the castle, and he meets the brides of Dracula. He does all of these things, and then he just kind of disappears. And Seward's like, I don't know what happened to him at all. And then
Yeah.
we get three-fourths of the way through the story. Harker shows up again. He's like, hey,
Yeah.
so Dracula wants to take my bride, and things are going bad. Vampires are real. I
Hmm.
think if they made Paul more of a Harker character and made him just that beginning catalyst who disappears until the end, where Karen like
Yes.
reaches back out to him and says, I discovered this, and then she and Paul went to defeat it, it
I,
would be
I
better.
yeah, I feel like I also feel like we could have just used Paul. You also could have just used Paul as somebody we go back to, and he's learning about the cult, about what's the cult's about. Why are they at this town? We could have got all of that from Paul, and then we jump back in, to the main relationship, and you have a better understanding of what's going on. But
Yeah, I part of my issue with this movie and a lot of vampire films in the first place is that the vampires are really, really obvious. And
yes,
so I think this film would really benefit from attempting to make Sinestre like the border between a vampire and a magician, where the audience isn't quite sure if he's like demon possessed, a magic charismatic person, or a vampire, and really blurring the lines, because knowing that he's a vampire right from the start is
it's very obvious.
it's so obvious, and it kind of ruins a lot of the potential horror in the
It
film or
does.
the potential thrills, because when characters go off with him, they just die. and you
It-
know it's coming, and like the reveal of him not having a reflection or him turning into a bat or like any of these other vampire tropes aren't aren't well done because we
I,
already know he's a vampire and it
yeah, we
doesn't
already
feel
know that.
gratifying to
It,
watch.
it doesn't. It's like, especially when I see when that stuff happens, and I just see him just like he doesn't feel much of a threat because this guy is literally just knocking on the door, having a conversation with Paul, and then dips. Like
Yes.
there's what's the threat here? Ain't this guy supposed to be some like big bad like the devil? The devil likes him. Like
Yeah,
where this I
the
don't
talisman
understand.
is what protects Paul because the talisman when Sinestre kills Anne, he drops his talisman and Paul finds the talisman on the
Yeah,
bridge.
yeah.
And then that acts as basically an aegis against
And doesn't the
the
butler does the butler
vamp.
get it back? That guy that comes in his room?
Yes, the butler is the one who comes in, steals it back, and then that's why Paul's killed. And, they sacrifice him and they're like, yeah, we killed the non believer. Woo!
Yeah,
Was because he no longer had the talisman. But, like,
yeah.
Paul never figures out how important that talisman is. No character even
No
really figures
character.
it out. So, of what's the point of the
Don't they
talisman?
kind of drop it? Don't they kind of just drop it out of nowhere?
Yeah, when
Like,
Paul's dead, that's it. Like,
that's
even
it.
the police don't need the talisman. There's no character needs the talisman. Sinestre has the talisman back now for protection, but it doesn't matter because he runs into the sun and dies anyways.
Also, also why I also said he wasn't much of a threat. Do you see his weapon he has?
Yeah, he's got a cane with a tiny little knife
I
in there that if it were to stab
yeah.
you, it would
I
not hurt at
saw
all.
I saw that and I was like, "Oh, this is your weapon and how to kill people? You're telling me this is what you use?" Like,
Yeah,
what is
and
that?
he kills people a couple times with the cane, and it's just kind of silly to watch.
It is. It's so quick too. It's so quick.
It is
It,
so quick. And I'm like,
it,
"You're a vampire, why wouldn't you just tear open their throat?" Or
uh,
is that
the, you
too
know
much
what?
for you?
You know what's funny? A lot of these old vampire movies, they don't want to go that far. They never want to go that far. It's always that, oh no, the blood gets drank in a cup,
Yes.
or the blood is somehow like just getting transferred into their arms or something. They never want to go that far with it.
Yeah, and that's because of a lot of US copyright and regulations
Oh
for
yeah.
film during this time because you weren't allowed to show nudity or certain types of violence, and that gets lifted in the 70s, which is why the 70s goes
Oh
really
yeah.
ham wild
Which
on nudity and gory stuff.
I did watch a 70s vampire movie recently, and it's a blood cult thing, and they fully go into it. They fully rip, blood is everywhere, all over their faces. Like they actually like for real go into it. So that definitely
Which
does make more sense.
Yeah, and I personally think the 70s was one of the greatest decades for horror films. And I'm kind of
A lot of good low budget stuff. A lot of good stuff like that.
yeah, I'm of the belief that like every 20 years we get really good horror. So like the 70s was pretty great for horror, and then the 90s was pretty decent for
Free.
horror, and then the
So
2010s.
there's some really good ones. There's some really good ones in the 90s.
But like then you get to the 50s, which isn't really great horror. It's just really
The,
good
the
hokey horror.
it's really good. I'd say the 50s is really crime drama, like
Ooh,
like
yeah.
crime drama slash what's it sci-fi. A lot of sci-fi like film. Like a lot of those films are like, oh, there's a new element, like element 1112 whatever. That's the big bad. That's the big thing that's killing people. A lot of those type of movies. That's a lot of the 50s, or these like monsters in suits.
Mhm.
But
Yeah, I don't know. Vampire fun fact. Nosferatu is the film that revolutionized vampires in the way that they're not able to go out into the sun. Uh,
Yes.
and it before that, when we actually had Dracula and other forms of vampires, Dracula walks in the sun. Like everything is fine. They can
Yeah,
be out
everything is fine.
in
Everything
sunlight,
is good. It's until the
but
cross. Until the cross shows up. Oh, then the
mhm.
sun. The sun is the enemy now.
Yeah, and so, after Nosferatu, all of these vampire films started adding in sunlight as the enemy, and this one with Sinestre dying to sunlight,
It
it's like
makes
it's his
no
own fault.
sense. It makes no sense.
No, it's unrewarding because all of the characters you've cared about are dead, except for Karen, who's just been kind of dragged along for the past 30 minutes, and
Yeah.
then he runs into the sun and dies because he's scared of getting crushed by rocks because
That,
rocks can kill vampires?
like,
What?
isn't this guy supposed to be like the devil to people? This guy's the devil to the townspeople. What do you mean he just dies in sunlight at the end? Like what? But 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 I will say this: we have to get into it. What was like your final thoughts? What did you like and dislike about the movie? Like, what was the final thoughts here?
So, um, to repeat a little bit earlier, I really liked the scene that was them standing on the bridge. She looks down and doesn't see his reflection, and you can just kind of see on her face like the uh oh,
Yeah,
her piecing it
right.
together. Those first 20 minutes, the intrigue that happens, the kind of who is part of this cult that you've seen a little bit about and who isn't. Like, is the inspector actually a cultist and he's intentionally misleading Paul? A lot of
Yes.
those questions were really interesting. And then we skip ahead and we get to London and we do a lot of the more boring stuff. And then we get to the party scene, and the party scene was very interesting because of Karen and Paul. And basically, everything after the party scene
Falls
lost my
Creek. Yeah,
interest.
lost
It
me.
it
Oh,
gets really bad. It misses so much. So I think the best stuff are those moments, and for the worst stuff, honestly, this film suffers from a plot that could have been so much better. If
yes.
the writers had just sat in a room with each other for a little bit longer and asked why a couple more times,
Yes.
this would
Yes.
have been an infinitely better film that might have been worth coming back to every couple years just to watch it. Because the actors' portrayal of their characters aren't bad, with the exception of like Peter Eiling as Inspector Malin, because he's just
He's funny. He's funny
stereotypical
bad.
French.
He's funny bad to me. He's funny bad to me.
Well, he
I
is funny bad, exactly, but
love
it's
I love Mullen.
the
He-
the film takes itself so seriously that
yes, yes, that's the
having an
problem.
inspector in there being the way he is, it's it just doesn't work
It
because
does
he's so
not. It does
funny
not work at
that
all.
it goes against the vibe of the film. So I think this film suffers from plot. I'm very forgiving when it comes to the special effects, and especially with low budget stuff, you got to do what you can to, like the rock crushing Tanya. It does not look good, but they didn't have too much of a budget. So
Yeah,
I'll forgive them on that. But what I won't
yeah.
forgive them is sets, because you have the French hotel, which is really interesting at the beginning with the forest and the kids and
In the
whatnot.
beginning,
And then you flip over to London, and every scene in
a
London
boring,
is
just
so boring.
boring.
It's These are such unidentifiable location of room inside house,
Yep.
house, apartment, shop,
Like this, like
laboratory number 7.
feel like some like sitcom shooting over here. Like, like just
Exactly.
it just sets like when everything goes to London except the party scene. The party scene's really good, but like like London, when we go back to London, it's just so boring. It's just what are we doing here? You know, it feels like nothing is progressing here.
Yeah, like Sinestre only follows because he wants his talisman back, and they want to kill Paul because Paul took the talisman,
Yeah.
and he didn't even know what it was. He's just like, "What's happening here? I guess this is mine. I I wonder what happened to my friend." But yeah, In terms of good, again, I'll do kind of a compliment sandwich here with the good, bad, good. The costumes are pretty solid because of the colors that they decide to use. When they're outside and they're away from the cult, everything is really dull and gray and earthly.
Yes,
But
yes,
when they're with the cult, everything is very bright red and like bloody feeling. And
yes,
so, I feel like the director wanted these people to be covered in like wounds and blood and like dancing around an
yeah,
altar just soaked in somebody's blood, but instead had to settle for evil robes because uh,
yeah,
laws.
yeah, yeah,
You
yeah.
can't quite show that stuff. But yeah, so I think that's the good, bad, good.
What
Um,
was what's your final? If you were gonna score this, what's your score on this?
so I think I would give it a 2 out of 10 simply
Okay, okay,
because the the good parts that are worth watching are good. You don't miss anything by not watching them. I don't expect anyone to look this up on YouTube after this episode and just watch it or watch the good parts. The good parts are good, but they're not so good that it's worth watching the movie just for that. So that kind of gets it a score right there. And the other thing is, I'm a sucker for colors, and I'm a
it's
big
pretty.
fan of a lot of the scenes of good colors, and so I give
It's
it a point for that.
yeah, yeah,
But this film is just shoulda, woulda, coulda, should
yeah.
have been better, could have had a better plot and more interesting characters, and it
Right, right.
would have been better if it had.
I I'll give you my like and all that stuff. I feel like this. I what I really liked about this movie that it had really good setup, and I really like the opening scene. The opening scene really sold the movie for me at in the moment. I'll say in the moment. And
Yeah.
I I would say I really like everything before they go to London, and then the party scene. The party scene. I really like the party scene because it feels like it's like haunting in kind of a sense. It really has that like this is not a party. It feels like nobody here is really having fun. Like it feels really forced, and I don't know. I just really like it like that, and I really like Karen in the beginning, but again, her character falls short. I just say what I really disliked about this movie is everything just fell short.
Mhm.
Character arcs, character stories just become nothing as the movie keeps going on. I would really love if the movie focused on more of the cult. You
Mhm.
know, why why do people look at the cult like hope? Why when we're seeing a cult scene, everybody's happy about it. Everybody's having a good time. You know, I want to learn about that stuff in the movie, and it just doesn't deliver. And the ending, I can't get over this. The ending really made me mad when I watched it. I hate the ending. I hate the ending. The ending ruins the movie for me.
Yeah, the ending is really just, "Okay, we can't let this film go on forever. What do we do? Okay, we'll do this."
And and honestly, I'm glad they did that because honestly, they were setting up for nothing.
Yeah,
What
exactly. Like,
eh,
I
you
I
know,
don't
my you go ahead. You go ahead.
I don't think the film would have been better if the whole cross thing never happened to Karen and she just did become a bride and he got 2 brides and, was living very polyamorously, having a good time, or if he
Yeah,
dies. Like, I don't think that would have fixed the film because the rest of the film fumbled so hard that the ending, it doesn't matter what happens to these
it
characters.
doesn't matter at all.
They don't matter.
I mean, some
It's really
characters even
funny.
disappear. Like some characters even just disappear out the movie. Like
Yeah, what happens to the inspector? Does he just
yeah,
stop?
no, yeah. They mentioned Inspector Mullen, and I was excited. I was like, "Oh, Mullen's gonna bring me back." When they're driving to the location, and they mention Inspector Mullen, and I'm like, "Oh, Mullen's gonna come back. They might bring me back in the movie." but he doesn't come. He doesn't come back. Like,
It's funny. I'm feeling inspired right now to basically write my own version of this, but better. And
yeah,
one of the things that I would fix is what I said earlier for the plot, but also instead of just having random British police officers being the ones to stumble in the cult, it should be the inspector.
yes, it should be the
Like,
inspector.
who's been trying to figure it out the whole time and has
And
been as skeptical as Paul.
it felt like in the beginning the inspector knew something that we didn't know.
Exactly. I thought he was part of the cult.
I thought
I
so
thought he
too,
was
because
red
how
herringing it.
mysterious he was being, like how mysterious he was being in the movie. Like I thought he would have had a bigger role in this.
And instead he knows nothing and disappears for the rest of the film. Which, I guess if that isn't a metaphor for this film in the first
Yeah,
place, it knows
yeah,
nothing, it says nothing, it does nothing, and it will fall into obscurity in 1 month. You won't remember this.
yeah.
I probably won't either.
I'm gonna be a little more generous. I'll give it a 4 out of 10. I've seen way worse. I've seen way worse.
That's
I've seen way
fair.
worse. 4 out of 10. That's how I feel about the movie. So, did y'all like the movie? Did you hate the movie? Did you even check it out? Did you just heard? Have you even heard of this movie? I don't know. Let me know. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you, Noah, for coming on the show. And tell the people, what are you working on? Well,
Yeah, so I do a radio theater that explores mental health through the lens of horror and drama. And so my whole thing is basically like personifying imposter syndrome or depression and grief, making that into monsters or demons or whatnot, and then finding ways to overcome them. And
right.
so I'm working on two things right now. I'm finishing up writing season 7, which is about a man who is living his life with his family, and then he dies. And he, as a ghost, has to watch his family continue forward while he is powerless to do anything whatsoever. So there's some horror in there, and there's a lot of stuff about grief and losing loved ones while also being powerless to do things and being able to say, okay, you know what? I need to take a step back. I can't do anything here.
Yeah.
A lot of really strong things there. And then the other thing I'm working on is something called the Phantom Airwaves, which is a full length show about an hour 15 long, that will be recorded in about a month and a half. And basically, what it is a radio is discovered that is possessed by an eldritch god,
Really?
and
Really?
a bunch of teenagers have to figure out why, what is happening, and what should I do to stop it.
Right. Hey, you got your work cut out for you. You guys, I'm gonna tell you something. I clicked. I saw you gave me your podcast. I looked at
Mhm.
it. I clicked on one episode and I was like, oh, this guy's doing something special here. So links will be in the description of his show and everything. Go to the description. Go check out his show because Noah here is doing some fantastic work for the podcast scene. This guy is doing high quality stuff that y'all need to go check out. So go check out his work. He's doing look, he's doing good things out there in the podcast world. All right. Go check it out. Anyways, Noah, thank you for coming on. Love to have you again. And yeah,
Thank you for having me.
thank you so much for coming on. And yeah, go check out his stuff, guys. Well, this is the end of the episode. I'll see y'all later. Hopefully, I don't get lazy and there's only 2 episodes out. So hopefully I get to episode 3. But we'll find out. Anyways, I'll see y'all later. Y'all have a good one. Bye.